Hey everyone, Sean Stevenson here, author of the Throne series, and today I am finally doing my January 2025 reading roundup. So what are all the books that I read during the month of January? Let's find out, because there were some definitely fun ones in here. First up, I read the second book in the Bloodhounds Inc. series, The Mystery of the Invisible Knight by Bill Myers. This series, as I've talked about in a couple of reviews now, is basically like the Christian version of Scooby-Doo. And it's definitely like a Scooby-Doo ripoff, which it's a lot of fun though, I will say. And okay, so I just discovered something the other day when I was talking to an author friend of mine, and we found out that there was actually a show of this book series made in the late 90s starring Richard Thomas from the Waltons. I couldn't believe it, and so I ordered the show on DVD. I now have the show on DVD, and I have watched the first episode, and the show's not good. But it is very 90s, and I laughed my whole way through it, and I do think the books are way better, in my personal opinion. And then next up, I read a book that I still need to review for the channel, because this is one of the heavy hitters. I read a Fear Street book, and this was kind of like my Christmassy, sort of wintry read that I did, and that was Fear Street Super Chiller, Silent Night. Okay, I loved this book. I thought it was so much fun. I really loved the mystery. I loved what was going on. I loved the parallels between Riva and her cousin. There's just so many fun things that are going on in this book, and I can't wait to talk about it more. This book was definitely a really, really good time. It's really good if you want to read something like Christmassy, but you want something spooky and something like a thriller. This is a great thriller for Christmas time. The main character is pretty despicable, but I will say, I actually don't think she's as terrible as people make her out to be. And I know that's probably controversial. I don't know. She does some pretty despicable stuff. But I also thought, I actually thought she was going to be worse than this based on the way everyone talks about her. So it was definitely an interesting character. I thought that this was well done and one of R.L. Stine's probably best. And then next up, I read another Spooksville book. I read book number 3, The Haunted Cave, which this was a lot of fun. This one is, to me, it's a good entry in the series. It was fun. I had a good time reading it. And I don't necessarily know if I'll revisit it. I don't know. I might revisit Spooksville later on in my lifetime. We'll see. But I definitely enjoyed reading this one, and I want to find out what happens next. I'm just not quite in the mood for an alien book yet, which the next book is like an aliens kind of book. So I'm not quite in the mood for aliens just yet. So I gotta wait on that. But I am excited to find out what happens in Spooksville, because this series is just a lot of fun. It's a spooky middle grade series where, you have characters who are living in this town where really spooky stuff happens, and there's an overarching mystery in this series, which is a lot of fun and really different from other spooky middle grade book series from the 90s. So this one, definitely a series worth checking out. And then the next book I read was an actually not problematic book from the Berenstein Bears Big Chapter series, but kind of bland. It was the Berenstein Bears' Media Madness by Stan and Jan Berenstein. Now this book, it just was kind of bland. Like, it wasn't, this book wasn't as controversial as some of the other Berenstein Bear books, like School Scandal Sheet or The Drug-Free Zone. This one was just kind of bland. I also didn't like it as much. I think the ones I like the most are the mystery type ones of Berenstein Bears, like the Galloping Ghost, those kinds of ones. Those are really fun. This one is more like about the Berenstein Bears are getting this TV show equipment at their school, and so they're going to make a TV show, and all the things that happen that take up their time and all these sorts of things. So it felt like it was a lot of plot having to be stuffed into a very short book, and a short book that has tons and tons of pictures in it as well. So The book was kind of rushed, in my opinion, and didn't really get to like dive into what it was trying to talk about and all these different topics, but it still was fun. It's another entry in this series that was a lot of fun. Berenstain Bears big chapter books are kind of like longer books than the picture books of Berenstain Bears, written by Stan and Jan Berenstain, and they are like really first reader kind of chapter books. Some of them are kind of weird, but this one just kind of bland. And then next up, I read the first book in a 5 or 6 book series. I can't quite figure it out, if I'm being honest with you, because this was back in the day when books were written that didn't have more than one, it wasn't going to be a series necessarily. So it was kind of like, okay, we have book 1. Oh, it sold really well. Will you write a sequel to that book because it sold well? So this is My Babysitter is a Vampire by Anne Hodgman. And this is book number 1 in the My Babysitter is a Vampire kind of like series. And I gotta say, this was a fun, spooky book. It was really creepy. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It had a great setting. It's like off the coast of Maine in the summertime. Like, it was just so fascinating. And also the vampire lore that is in this book is a lot of fun too. I just really, really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. This series is definitely a middle grade series from the 90s. It's from the, let's see, which one is this? This is a weekly reader, but I believe the other ones are all from Minstrel. But this is definitely a fun one if you like vampire type stories and you want something a little spooky from the 90s. You can't go wrong with this one. I've not read book 2, but this one also has a great climax. Like, the climax is so thrilling and exciting. Loved it. It was so much fun. And then next up, I read the most intellectual middle grade spooky book I've ever read, and I really enjoyed it. I have a whole review of this book up on the channel, but this is Spine Tinglers number 7, Snow Day by M.T. Coffin. And this one, like I say in my review, there is no creepy snowman in the book. I just feel like I have to say that because the cover is so misleading about what this book is actually about. This book is a lot of fun. I so enjoyed it. Definitely worth reading. I think this is not like a breeze through it kind of spooky book. You gotta read it like really thinking of it through and paying attention because it's complicated. Like, there were a few times I was like, wait, what is happening? Like, what's going on? And not in a like, ooh, I need to find out what's happening, but in a like, okay, wait, I need to go back and like relook at that chapter really fast because I don't think I caught what was happening. This is a lot of fun and definitely a mind bender, in my opinion. So definitely check this one out. Spine Tinglers is another series that comes around the time of Goosebumps. It's like capitalizing on that spooky middle grade book craze from the 90s, and it's a lot of fun. There are some good entries in this series. Granted, I have not read some of them that a lot of you on YouTube here have said are terrible, so we'll see what happens when I get to some of those. But so far, the ones I've read of Spine Tinglers have been a lot of fun. And then next up, I read book number 4 in a series that I have been reading for a while. And now I really want to get to book 5. It's a little bit of a longer book, though, book 5. So I'm kind of like holding it for a little bit. I'm reading some shorter stuff right now before I get to a longer book again. But this was book number 4 in the Janitor series, Strike of the Sweepers by Tyler Whitesides. And this series is a lot of fun. It is literally about janitors in schools, and they are fighting to save the human race from these like evil creatures called toxites that are trying to like dumb down the brainwaves of children. It's a wild series, but so much fun. This book had some twists and some turns that I was really interested and excited to see. Okay, I do have to say, I haven't reviewed this yet, I'm going to soon, but I do have to say, there is one plot twist in this book that I saw a mile coming. And I just thought, well, we all know it's this. Like, stop dragging that out. Like, we know that's what it's going to be. So just do it already. And it's like saved for a big like final reveal. And you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, I knew that back in chapter 2. So, but other things surprised me. And there were some new places to explore, So many fun things. So this one definitely worth checking out, the Janitor series. It's a middle grade fantasy series from Shadow Mountain Publishers, who do like Fablehaven and some of those other series like Frank L. Cole's books. A lot of fun. And then I couldn't stay away. I had to read another book in this series. So I read book number 3 in the Bloodhounds Inc. series, Phantom of the Haunted Church by Bill Myers. Now I gotta say, I haven't reviewed this one yet, but this one was not good. It was not very good. I really did not enjoy this one. This one kind of fell apart for me. It just like wasn't the same as the other 2 books. I feel like it didn't have any great sequences like the other 2 did, where it's like this ongoing like action sequence where like this affects this and this bumps into that and that causes this to happen. This one just didn't really have any sequences like that. And I was a little disappointed because those are some of the best parts of the earlier 2 books and making them so zany and fun. And this one just was kind of typical. It actually reminded me a lot of a Heebie-Jeebies book. And I kind of, as soon as I thought of that, I was like, oh, this is going to be just like that Heebie-Jeebies book. And it was. So, it was fine. And then the next book I read was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it. And it was book number 1 in the Ghosts of Fear Street series, Hide and Shriek. This was a great story. I so enjoyed it. I thought that the scares were there. It was like creepy buildup throughout the story. The characters are great. It's a great entry and beginning to the Ghosts of Fear Street series. Ghosts of Fear Street is another kind of goosebumpsy sort of anthology series. It's not written by R.L. Stine, even though it says R.L. Stine's Ghosts of Fear Street. Each book is ghost written by somebody else, and the books are all really good, pretty much. Like, I haven't read any that I thought were really bad. There are a couple that are more medium-ish, but most of the ones I've read have been good. I've enjoyed them. This series is kind of a play off of Fear Street, where you have the middle schoolers of Fear Street instead of like the high schoolers in the Fear Street series. You have all the middle schoolers and they're going to Shadyside Middle School and all the really spooky things that happen to them. There's a lot more like supernatural stuff in the Ghosts of Fear Street series than in Fear Street. Sometimes Fear Street books are just thrillers or just like, you know, kind of like the Scream slasher kind of storylines. This one has more of the supernatural stuff going on. So there's more like actual spooky things happening in the books. But this one was a ton of fun. Definitely a worthy first edition. And there is a new cover coming out that actually looks awesome. That's of this same book. And they're re-releasing a lot of these coming out soon. So I'm excited for those re-releases. Definitely check these out. It's a lot of fun. I don't know what it was, but there was just something in me that really wanted to read something really different. Near the end of January, I was thinking, oh, I kind of want to just read something super different than any of the other stuff I've been reading. And so I was looking at my shelves and this book caught my eye. And at first I thought, no, I don't want to read it. I don't know. And I kind of passed it by and I was looking at other stuff. But then I went back to it because I was like, no, I'm actually kind of curious about it now. What book am I talking about? I am definitely talking about The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. Now, C.S. Lewis is the one who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia series, like The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, etc., etc. He also wrote the Space Trilogy, like Out of the Silent Planet and That Hideous Strength, and some other books that he's written. He's written a lot of nonfiction as well. Some of his books that he's written are like Mere Christianity, The Great Divorce, a bunch of different books about Christianity. Some of his are really thought-provoking and really pretty good. I really enjoyed when I read The Great Divorce. That was a very fascinating book and also A Grief Observed. But my favorite C.S. Lewis book is Till We Have Faces, which is a retelling of a Greek myth. And that book blew my mind when I read it. So I've always really enjoyed C.S. Lewis. I like his writing style. I think it's very like intellectual, but also approachable all at the same time. And the Screwtape Letters, this is a weird, creepy book. I definitely felt really creeped out while I was reading this book. This book is about this elder demon named Screwtape who is writing like letters of advice to his nephew Wormwood, who is a demon tormenting this human person on Earth. And Screwtape is giving like all this advice, infernal advice, to Wormwood. And there's a progression. Each chapter is a letter from Screwtape, and then the final chapter is Screwtape proposes a toast, which is like Screwtape's speech at the like infernal college where they teach demons how to torment people. It is a wild book, but it's really creepy. I'm going to be doing a review on this book because I feel like I have a lot to say about it. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is how much this book was written way back in like the 40s and 50s. And I feel like it's still so applicable to like today. Like some of the stuff that C.S. Lewis talks about in this book through the lens of Screwtape is really creepy and fascinating all at the same time. Because you're really thinking, how is he tapping into all of these emotions and thoughts and feelings that people have towards each other and attitudes that human beings have that you've never heard named, but as soon as you read it in here, you're like, oh, that's so real. So this was definitely a fun book. There are some weird moments in this book. And there's definitely, this book is a Christian book, but as I am a children's pastor. And so as a children's pastor, I definitely am not theologically on the same train as everything in this book. There's some stuff in here that I was like, nah, I don't agree with that. But I still think this was a fascinating book to read. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit different, this might not be the worst book to try. And then to round out my January, I decided to read an Oz book. I just was kind of, after Screwtape Letters, I wanted something really laid back and just fun and whimsical. And so I've had this book on my shelf for quite a while. It's an Oz book I've never read. And so I thought, well, why don't I just read it? And that is Handy Mandy in Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. Now, this Oz book was kind of unhinged, but it also had a great villain. Sometimes Ruth Plumly Thompson has some super good villains, and I think this one has an exceptional villain that's really menacing, really scary. You're wondering what's going to happen, and this one, sometimes some Oz books have really great mystery to them, and I feel like this is one of those Oz books that has a great mystery. There are some different things that show up, and one thing that showed up that I did not even remember until someone in the book talked about it being related to this other thing in Oz, and I was like, oh yeah, I 100% forgot about that. I can't believe I didn't even think of that when that thing first appeared, that was related to this. So there's some fun callbacks in this book to early Oz books, and I really enjoyed reading this one. I will say, there are a couple sequences that are a little odd, which is typical for Ruth Plumly Thompson. So definitely this one is a product of its time. So it's definitely something you have to go into this knowing. But it was a lot of fun, and I think it was a great Oz book to read. So Handy Mandy in Oz, it's up there in the Ruth Plumly Thompson catalog of Oz books. It's one of the later ones for her. So I only have a few Oz books I haven't read by Ruth Plumly Thompson. There's 4 of them that I have not read. So I'll probably be looking for another one soon to read because this one was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed reading it. So overall, January was a lot of fun. I had some great books in there that I read. I really enjoyed some of the different things that I was able to get to. I was glad to finally read a book like Screwtape Letters, which is like a classic. And it's one that I've read excerpts from before, but I'd never read the full thing. So that was a lot of fun to read. And then getting to some of those spooky middle grade books was a lot of fun. So we'll see how many books I get to in the month of February. I ended up reading 12 books in January. There was one picture book I read that I didn't include here because I don't have the copy of it and it's not worth talking about. So sometimes that happens. I read those picture books and they're sometimes not worth talking about. So otherwise, we'll see what I read in February. And until next time, everybody, keep reading. Bye.